Hello there, everyone. I'll just wait for a few seconds to see if anyone's joining. But I'd like to welcome you, the guys that are here. And do bear with me because one of my first times talking in a live conference like this, so a little bit of anxiety going on. But I hope you're all doing well. Give me a little shout out in the comments if you're here. So there's been some great speakers so far. I've been tuning into a couple of the videos. I just watched the last one with Nick. Really good stuff. It's just wonderful to get everyone together and just do something like this, you know. Okay, so we'll go ahead and make a start then. Okay, so my name is Sean Harris, and I am a fairly new dog trainer. I'm studying degree level applied canine behavior and training. And you know, really I have a passion for sort of behavior and what drives behavior. Where does it come from? My previous experience with working in children's homes, working with children who have challenging behaviors. And this is normally due to attachment issues, abuse, neglect, trauma. And during my time in the sort of working in these settings, I come across a model called P.A.C.E. And the model was aimed at, well, it was aimed at working with children and building positive relations with these children. How do we interact with children? How do we engage with children? How do we set up an environment where children feel safe enough to express themselves and be themselves and talk about their past experiences and sort of really learn who they are. But I loved it, you know, I loved the methods, the methodology to it, the system, the structure of having something that you can just sort of think in your mind and think, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna, you know, I should probably approach this subject this way, you know. And it's not a blueprint and it's not a script, and it's more of a way of being and a way of talking, you know. But I really enjoyed it, and I really loved that aspect of things. And then when I started getting into dogs and dog behavior, I started to see that there's a potential crossover in how I was using this system of P.A.C.E. in children's homes and how I sort of work with dogs, how I interact with dogs and engage and try to build these positive relationships. So there are some differences, which we will address, obviously, because dogs are not children. And the abuse and neglect that children have suffered is so much, well, maybe it's not more complicated, but it's a different set of complications compared to dogs. So this has a special place for dogs that have come from a bad background, had some bad experiences, and have reason to be fearful or not trust people. And it's a good way of just sort of thinking about, okay, how do we start giving these dogs good impressions of people? How do we start getting this dog to trust people again, you know? So I do have a bit of a slide put together. It was thrown together sort of last minute. So there might be a few little errors here or there. I have a big habit of kind of just talking quickly and trying to power through things. So I'm going to try and slow down and give whoever's watching a chance to come up with any questions that they may have. But yeah, we'll get into it and get into the slides. So obviously this first one I've put here, we've got playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and expectation. And that's kind of what P.A.C.E. stands for. When we're looking at the model for working with children and young people, the expectation was actually empathy. But I find that empathy is kind of covered in the acceptance in my own model for dogs. And expectation is something that I wanted to talk about as well, as because it's actually a really big and important part. And it just happens to fit in with P.A.C.E. You can still use the word of P.A.C.E. So that's really good. So let's move on to the next slide. So what is it and where does it come from? So obviously I've spoken a little bit about it. It's an idea, it's a state of mind, it's a framework, and it's used in therapeutic childcare. It was developed by Dr. Dan Hughes, who was a clinical psychologist based in the United States. It's widely used in children's homes and professional child services. It's used as part of a treatment for young people who have experienced abuse and neglect. It's a system for thinking of how we talk to and interact with children and young people. What is PACE originally used for? It's a way of talking to and interacting with children and young people. These children have experienced trauma, abuse, and neglect, quite often like the rescue dogs that we end up working with. And they often present challenging behaviors that cause barriers to forming relationships. Now, this is the real kind of important thing. This is the real meaty part of why I think there's a big crossover. Because often, as dog trainers, we work with clients that have rescue dogs, and we have little information about their histories. And what they tend to get is a dog with a history full of issues and problem behaviors, and owners or clients that just have no idea how to manage that and to manage their emotions and manage the dog emotions, the emotions of the dog. The adaptation for using PACE with dogs. So what does this have to do with dogs? Dogs are not children, but I definitely think that there's a change in the industry. As I started learning my own journey and started sort of doing my degree work and reading books, and you can sort of see that the way that we treat dogs over the years is kind of progressing, sort of the way that we just started to think about how we treat children. To begin with, children's homes were just these big, giant centres where there were beds in a rows, and there was no sort of therapeutic work or sort of care work particularly. They were just kind of stuck there, and it was a place for them to survive in. And often what happened was you got challenging behaviours from that. They fed off each other. They had no support network in place, and often it led to sort of bad roads. And then, sort of, especially in the UK, we've done really well, I think, in the child's industry and how we sort of manage and look after kids now. And I think the same is sort of happening with dogs. We're starting to think more and more about the dogs and their emotional imbalances and their emotional needs, which I think is really great. Oh, went the wrong way. There we go. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead again. So how is it useful? PACE provides a way of thinking, feeling, communicating, and behaving that aims to make a dog feel safe. PACE can help us to build positive interactions that can build feelings of safety, trust, and relationships with a dog who may have good reason to fear people. So a little bit of what I've already spoken about, and you'll find that I'm going to do that as well as I talk. I've got a lot of ideas in my head, and I'll kind of talk about things before they come up, which is one of my bad habits when it comes to these kind of things. I am still learning, so please bear with me. Positive interactions. Okay. PACE for Dogs aims to build a history of positive interactions between person and dog, something that dogs may not be used to. And this is, especially, I see this quite a lot in dogs that they were raised outside dogs. They spend most of their life on a chain. Food come from someone come and put food down. But there was little interaction with people, and often the interaction they did get was probably not positive interaction. It was probably interacting when the dog was barking or doing something that the owner didn't like, and there was a lot of bad emotion and negative emotion from the owner. So the dog might start to learn that people can be quite dangerous for them, can be quite unsafe and not very stable. And it helps us manage emotions. It helps us manage our own emotions, and it helps us manage the emotions of the dog as well. You're already using it, yeah? So sometimes it kind of feels like I'm teaching people to suck eggs when I sort of talk about PACE, and it definitely felt like that when we were in children's homes, because the concepts are not new, and you're already using them. But what PACE does is it kind of brings everything together into a structure that can be used in a more conscientious and systematic way. You can sort of walk into interactions and think, okay, PACE, and then you can start to take the different aspects that I'm going to talk about and sort of try to mold them into your approach and how you're going to interact and how you plan interact with the dogs. So, slight difference on my take. It's still the playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, but I put expectation on the end because I think there's a really, really good thing to talk about there, rather than the empathy. Empathy kind of comes in with the acceptance anyway. I think us as dog owners and dog enthusiasts, trainers, and the reason that you guys are here, I'm sure you're already empathetic and you've got real genuine feelings and you want the best for your dog. Okay, playfulness. It was quite interesting when I first sort of started learning about PACE and playfulness come up. It wasn't so much about playing games all the time, and it kind of rings true about dogs as well. So playfulness isn't just about playing. It's about creating a light, relaxed atmosphere. It's showing calming and interested body language, creating a history of positive shared experiences and interaction between people and dogs. So we're looking at the sort of the way that we use our voice and the way that we use our body language. So our voice in particular. So a dog, a rescue dog that's come with bad experiences. They might have been shouted at. They might have had frustrated owners that just didn't know how to manage them in that situation, and they've reacted. And the dog starts to connect the two things together. Whenever my owner is talking like this, or their voice is tightening up, or they're raising their voice, bad things tend to happen, and I feel bad. So especially with rescue dogs, it's about keeping the tone of voice calm and light, non-threatening, sort of like the voice you may use when you're telling a story. It's rather than irritated or a lecturing tone, like, oh, what are you doing again, dog? It's about trying to keep that kind of, oh, hello there, how are you doing? Oh, you're a good dog, aren't you? Calm and responsible. It's about creating a sense of enjoyment and having fun. There also may be times when we use our voice to create a feeling of excitement and interest, because dogs are very sensitive to, I feel, how we use our voice. I used to run a dog training class called Fun with Dogs, and this was sort of before I really knew anything about what I was doing. So it wasn't really a training class. It was more the idea of Fun with Dogs was to get people together, and we were just going to have some fun with our dogs. We were going to play recall races. We were going to play obedience games and sort of obedience games and things like that. But what I ended up getting was a class full of people who were not having fun with their dogs. The title Fun with Dogs just attracted these people with just crazy dogs. So my first sort of experience training, completely unprepared, was this class just full of absolute nutters. But they're all good. The people were all good. Everyone was so accepting, and the management side of it, I realized very quickly that I have to manage these things. Really, it's like the most important thing, because some of these dogs were a bit too reactive to be in the class. And obviously I've had to say, really, you can't have your dog here, because I can't provide safety. But what skills that I learned from that was that just having fun and being present and just being silly with your dog can change your dog's arousal level. Now I know a little bit more, and I'm studying, I'm doing my degree. We're starting to learn about arousal levels and hormone levels and stress levels and all these kind of things. You can go from sort of, I always have these tires, and I have them sort of separated in random ways. And the idea for this game was that we were going to walk the dogs through the tires, but we weren't going to pull them on the lead. We're going to just use our voices to beckon them come around. And I started to realize that if you're high pitched and you're excited, the dog would do it more quickly. Yeah. So suddenly you've got a dog that's just like wagging his tail and running. And then if you were to slow your voice down, like, oh, come here, please, come on, buddy. Yep, this way. The dog also slowed down and relaxed a little bit. And I thought, wow, that's what just the power of my voice and just changing tonality and the fastness of it and my body language changes the attitude of the dog as well. They're really sensitive to that kind of stuff. So that also has a negative effect as well. When you're angry and you're upset or you're frustrated, then it's going to have a sort of similar effect there. And I'm talking quite quickly again. I do apologize. Like my worst thing, I always do it and I get a bit nervous. Excellent. Body language and facial expression. Now, I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but there's been quite a few studies done that shows just how acute dogs are at picking up our facial expressions. Not only can they read our facial expressions, they're able to match our facial expressions to the tone of our voice. So that they can tell when we're angry or we're happy or joyful or sad. They're very astute at it. I was also reading a paper about left gaze bias, which just fascinated me. So when a dog stares at a human face, they spend more time looking at the left side of the face. And we also do this as humans as well. So in our own social interactions, we tend to stare at the left side of the face. And that's because face is not symmetrical. And the left side of our face portrays emotions more effectively. And dogs do this with humans when they stare at humans, but not to other dogs, which indicates that dogs are naturally adept at reading humans in particular's faces, which I just thought was fascinating. So it's a good thing to sort of keep in mind when you are with a rescue dog or a dog that might have had some bad experiences. What is the bad body language that I'm portraying? Is the dog frustrating me right now? Am I actually angry? Because it might be a lot harder to hide it and pretend than you might think. And we're going to go over some strategies about how you can work with clients or yourself if you're feeling these feelings to kind of manage those situations when you do get frustrated, because we all get frustrated. I get frustrated with my own dog sometimes, and that was one of the main reasons, in my early days when I didn't really know much about behavior, a couple of times when my dog would do things and I would crumble. I don't know what to do. I'm upset and I'm angry and I've had to walk away. And now that I know a little bit more, come up with sort of a strategy about how to manage it, and I find it super useful for working with clients, and we'll go through that in a minute. Okay, playfulness. So getting back to sort of the playfulness side of things, when you're learning sort of about PACE and children and young people, we talk a lot about intersubjective moments. And intersubjectivity, it's quite a big word. I have no idea what it meant when I first heard it. Actually has a few different meanings in it, depending on where you're reading it and the context it's used in. But I think the best definition for me and how I'm using it here is just interaction. Yeah? So it's about being interactive with your dog. And it's about finding moments where you can share an experience together. You know, it would be the difference between putting a Kong on the floor for a dog and then just walking away, or holding a Kong in your hand and being like, hey, look what I've got, come over here, and holding it there while your dog licks it for them, you know, maybe giving them a bit of attention and a bit of fuss while they do, moving it around a little bit, being a bit interactive. And there's a big difference in that. And so I've made these two videos here to sort of show the difference in a subjective moment and just kind of like an enrichment moment. And both of these are good, and enrichment's a wonderful thing to do, especially sort of scent work and leaving your dog to explore areas is brilliant. These aren't bad videos, neither one of them. They're just very different. I want to see if anyone is in the chat and they're listening, if you can sort of tell me what you notice is the biggest difference as we sort of play these videos. Let me just play them. It should work side by side. This is my dog, Juno. Okay. It's exactly the same exercise. Around the tires and the area, I've hidden little bits of treats. Some have treats, some don't. I also have some treats in my pocket, which I can use as spontaneous, magical appearing treats at times. So if anyone is able to comment, what do you think the biggest difference is? I would say there's two main differences in the videos here. And don't worry if you can't comment. I'll just talk and pretend that you did. Oh, for some reason I was playing around there and it stopped the video. So we go. So I'll just go ahead and start talking about it. So obviously the biggest difference is that I'm in one of the videos and I'm not in the other video. That's the first big difference. Second difference is I have her on a lead with me on the video as well. Slower pace with you. Thank you very much, Molly. One is on the lead, one is free. Yeah. So you could do this without the lead, but obviously I've done this quite a lot with Juno, and I think if I was to go out with her, I've done both sort of the enrichment exercise and the sort of the interaction and subjective moments with her. She'd probably just run off and at this point go and do stuff anyway. So the lead kind of gives you that kind of, you're staying with me and we're exploring this area together. And it's also useful for dogs that you know do pull on the lead, are reactive on the lead. Because what you start to do is, what you'll find as well is with those sort of dogs, you'll pick up the lead and the dog goes bonkers. They go crazy. You know, they're expecting to go on a walk. They're not focused on you. They're focused on getting into the environment, you know. And reactive dogs especially are also highly tense and they're unsure about what they're going to expect on the walk. But it's also a good exercise to kind of get dogs used to just being on the lead with you in the garden or in the home and doing things that are interactive with you, you know. And she's very good. Most of the time she's getting to the treats before I am. But the ideal situation here is I'm kind of like finding the stuff for her and being like, look what's in here, and like taking off the lids of stuff and being like, look, there's a treat here. Wow, look what we found together. So it's about exploration, this video. And we won't watch it all. It goes on for about 6 minutes, so I will cut it off in a second. There are a couple of good little moments where you can really sort of see it on the left video, especially. Where I'm getting her attention just by sort of picking things up and showing her like, oh my God, wow, what's this, you know? And you can see that she doesn't get any of that on the other side of the video, you know? And it's still good enrichment. And these are sort of things that we'll do with a dog because they love it, you know? And the speed, yeah, it slows down the environment, it slows down the exploration, you know? On the other side of the video, she's just kind of like treat. Whereas this one, she's very much like, well, what do you have there then? What is that, you know? And of course, at times she's going to wander off and she's going to do things. I'm just using my voice here. I haven't got the sound on, obviously, but I'm just using my voice here just to be like, hey, come back here, using a bit of luring. I'm not giving any commands in this moment. This isn't about training her. I'm not saying come. I'm not saying sit. I'm not saying you must do this to get this reward. It's simply saying, like, it's just simply saying we're exploring this area. Look at all this cool stuff we're finding together. I mean, you could probably say that a lure is a command in some ways because you're sticking the food on the nose and they're following it, but it's still interactive, and that's what I like. You know, I'm not standing there giving her no movement, no sort of touch, no guidance, and giving her commands. It's just about exploring the place together, getting to know each other. Obviously, I've grown up with this dog. I had her as a puppy, and she knows me really well. And here was an interesting point. So she found there was a chew toy. So it's not a particularly hard one. It's quite easy for her to chew. But rather than just sort of let her take it, I held it in my hand and allowed her just kind of like crunch it and eat it from my hand as well. And I did a bit of movement with it as well, just to get things moving, be a bit more interactive. Say, look, when you're interacting with me, good things are happening. Because interactions with people is a good thing. More, yeah. Thank you for the comments there. I was like, oh, is anyone watching? Maybe I'm talking to myself. I appreciate that a lot. So yeah, so the interesting thing is actually the videos actually went on. I'll stop them there anyway. So the videos actually went on for about the same time, and she almost goes to the same places. So I did the left side one first, and then I set up the right one for her. So she actually kind of went to the same places, almost in the same way, but not exactly. You know, and there's a bit here at the end actually that we'll talk about. We'll watch it to the end. Oh, my cat jumped on, and yep. Thank you, Rick. Obviously, my cat has just jumped all over the keyboard. Thank you, buddy. Because that's what cats do. Let's get that to about where it was. And there is about here. So a little bit on the end where I do start to do a little bit of just giving her rewards for stuff. But I'm not giving her any commands in this point. So I like to do these kind of things with her where I just kind of get her to follow me. And whatever she does when she's following me is going to give her a reward. I walked off at that bit. I was trying to get it to the bit. Sorry, I don't know if anyone else has cats, but they love to jump on laptops. So here, for instance, I'm just using a bit of quickness, a bit of body language. I'm getting her to look at me there a little bit. I'm not giving the commands. I'm just using. I mean, your hands are commands, of course, visual cues. It's not really meant that way. She could do anything in those moments, and she would have got the reward. It's just like if you're going to interact with me, good things are going to happen. You know. And I love the way that she finishes and looks at me in this end bit. I'm stood there with the camera, and she's just staring at me like, "Is that it? Is there no more treats anywhere?" Like, which I think is really funny. Anyway, so yeah, so there's just an example of sort of, you know, the differences between interaction and sort of, I would say, enrichment, which are both useful and both good in their own rights. The first step to trust building are baby steps. And in the P.A.C.E, when we work in sort of children's homes and those sort of young people settings, we do quite a lot of work on early attachment. And whilst it's going to be different with dogs, I do think this is quite an interesting thing to keep in your mind. It's so similar to parent-infant interactions. When both parent and infant are delighting in being with each other and getting to know each other, both are feeling safe and relaxed. Neither feels judged nor criticized. Playful moments reassure them both that their conflicts and separations are temporary and will never harm the strength of their relationship. And I think that's super important. So even on them times when your dog does do something where you've had to raise your voice, and sometimes it will happen, you know, your dog might run towards a road. My dog, sometimes she'll be playing with my cat, Rick, and they get on really well, but she's bigger than he is. And he enjoys to play around, you know, they cuddle up together, but sometimes they have a little play fight, and she'll be a little bit too much for him, you know, and she won't pick up on the signs. And at those times, I might raise my voice and be like, you know, like that, you know. But straight after that, you know, she jumps straight off him. I then say, come over here, and then we do a bit of positive re-engagement. I don't let her sit there and suffer with it for a moment. I just kind of say, hey, that was a bit too much. Come over here, let's play a game. Let's do some tuggy. You're obviously quite amped up. Let's get the teddy bear out and do some tug of war or something for a moment. So it's about building a history of positive interactions. Yeah, so a great example of this is throwing a ball for a dog and the dog bringing it back to throw again. If you're just throwing the balls endlessly, there's no real interaction. The dog's just chasing stuff. Or pointing to something of interest for the dog to go and explore, and you going with the dog to explore. Interactive moments between two individuals. I spelled two wrong there, but that's fine. Another cool game that I like to play actually, which I just call the cupboard game. And it's quite stupid and quite silly, but I do it for all the time because she seems to love it. I just open cupboards, the bottom cupboards, and I just pretend whatever's in there is the most amazing secret object that I've ever found in my life. And I just go over the top exaggeration. I'm just like, oh my God, have you seen this? And then she comes over and I shut the cupboard a little bit. And I'm kind of like peeking inside it. I'm rattling things in there, and her ears are like perked up, and she's just like, yeah, what's in there? What's in there? And sometimes there'll be something in there, like I put a ball in there or I put a toy or a bit of food, but just getting that sort of positive reinforcement aspect to it. So it's not always just like a game of nothing in there. We do this all the time, sometimes there is something in there. Again, it's interaction. It's not me just leaving something down for her to chew on. And a good example of how this can be useful is when someone then knocks on my door, or some dog walks past my window and she's at the door and she's a little bit hypered. I can just go to the cupboard and be like, oh my God, what's in the cupboard? And she's bang to me like a shot, because she knows that experience is good. She knows it always ends in a positive way, never any bad negative emotions connected to it. And it's something that we've practiced and rehearsed, and I find that to be quite a powerful tool for people, especially if they've got dogs that do react quite negatively. And rescue dogs, when they haven't reacted negatively, have been abused, shouted at, hit, any of those kind of things, shoved in a crate for their bad behavior. So yeah, it's about finding a way to build a history of positive interactions. So when we're looking at building positive relationships, shared experiences will help shape a dog's worldview. When a dog is learning about you and how you fit into their world, using these moments of intersubjectivity to teach the dog that we are safe, fun, and interesting environmental factors in their world. Bad experiences. Often we see dogs that come from difficult backgrounds and come with a history of fear and anxiety. Even their feelings of joy and excitement can be loaded with anxiety, fear, and confusion. And I don't know if there's any trainers in here that might have come across this, but sometimes you can have dogs that even when good things are happening, they're on edge, they're stressed, they're worried. And it's often because the place that they've come from, they're not particularly just abusers, and good things have happened. Then the dog's done something that's triggered them and they've reacted badly. And then the dog starts to learn that actually even good things can end badly sometimes. And they start to mistrust good experiences and mistrust people. So that's why, and we'll get onto this a little bit at the end as well, getting ahead of myself. That's why I don't like to sort of give commands and do much training when I'm just focused on building a bond, because that's sort of where the expectation side of things come to. But we'll get to that in a minute. I'm rushing ahead. Yeah, a lot of conflicts, though not due to bad experiences. Yeah, always. So by practicing these shared moments of playfulness, we can start to give the dog a history of predictable outcomes of fun, joy, safety, and interaction with people that have never ended in anger or resentment. And that's a super useful tool to have in your dog's toolbox. Yeah, the understanding that, well, actually, every time we've done this game, nothing bad has ever happened. I like this game, and that rings true, especially for dogs that have never had that. It could help in moments of distress, a little bit as I was talking with the cupboard game. Once you have a history of these shared moments, they could be used in situations where a dog does become anxious or fearful, redirect the emotions of the dog. Because this way of being is predictable, have no negative emotions attached, the dog may understand that choosing to engage with you has a safe and predictable outcome. The A is for acceptance, moving on from playfulness. Now this one, I think, is probably paramount importance when dealing with clients that don't know how to accept bad behavior. The amount of times that I've been asked by clients, how do I say no to my dog? How do I tell my dog that I was unhappy with what they just did? How do I get my pound of flesh? And that the alarm bells always start ringing when you start to hear these things, because you think, well, it seems like you're highly emotional, and it's normal. It's normal to feel these emotions and anger. But there's no simple answer to that question of how do you say no to your dog. You have to teach your dog that there are better ways of doing things, and the boundaries in your home. But dogs don't really understand you just did something wrong. You know, we know this from adverse methods. You know, the timing would have to be precise. And dogs just don't understand it that way. Which is why none of us here use such bad methods anymore. One of the reasons, and others, is borderline abuse sometimes. So yeah, unconditional acceptance is at the core of building a feeling of safety in a dog's environment. It doesn't matter what the dog does, we're going to accept that behavior. And the interesting point when I ever mention this to clients is they suddenly think, does this mean that we're going to ignore every behavior? No. To be clear, this does not mean we're going to ignore and allow every behavior a dog does, because that would be crazy talk. It means that we're going to accept that dogs will sometimes behave in ways that we're going to find a challenge. Yeah. So we're not just going to allow a dog to do what they want, because sometimes we have to think about safety, and we have to think about management. We have to think about, you know, what are we reinforcing? So sometimes we are going to have to limit behavior. We as dog owners, handlers, and trainers have a duty of care to ensure the safety of people and for our dogs, safety for people and for our dogs. So there are times when we need to manage and limit certain behaviors. Acceptance is about understanding that the dog is more than the behaviors they exhibit. All behavior serves a function, and dogs behave in a way that has been reinforced. Yeah? So you can't blame a dog for being reactive. Can't blame a dog for pulling on a lead, because there's a reason they pull on the lead. Whether we know what that reason is or not, there's a reason for it. It doesn't stop us from getting frustrated, or owners from getting frustrated in the moments though. So how do we manage those emotions? How do we get clients to start to be aware of those feelings? At times, a dog's behavior may cause frustration, anxiety, and maybe even anger. If we develop a clear outline of the behaviors that may cause these emotions and understand that the dog will keep behaving this way until we as owners or trainers change something, yeah? We do not place blame on the dog. We understand that dogs need our help. And someone's messaging me, just a second, let's throwing things out. There we go. Yeah, so we understand that dog needs our help. And this is where my idea of planning comes into place. And this is one of the best tools to give a client that I've found so far, especially ones that you can tell are struggling with the emotional side of things. It's fail to plan, plan to fail. I often tell clients that they should write down every behavior that makes them feel anxiety, frustration, or anger. Then write a small plan on what you will do to manage this situation. It might be management or it might be training. There's usually two options. And you do this before you get stuck in those moments of focusing on the behavior instead of the root cause. And lead pulling is a great example. You know, so the amount of times I go on a walk with a client and they're showing the issue of the lead pulling, and they're getting yanked and they're getting their arm ripped off, and you can see they're building, they don't know what to do. You know, something as simple as writing down, okay, I know that lead pulling makes me feel frustrated and sometimes angry. This is what I will do when my dog pulls in the lead. I will stop. I will sit down if I have to. I will relax. I will take a deep breath. I will call my dog over. We'll try and get a bit of interaction going on. We'll try to start to sort of get that idea of pace going, the playfulness, start exploring the area. We'll try and slow them down. And then we'll continue with our walk and allow the dog to go to where they're going. You know, once the leash is like loose and the dog's kind of interacting with you, you know, let them go where they want to go, you know, and that's part of the relationship of a walk. So that just that simple thing of writing down all of those behaviors, you know, the jumping up, the reactivity, having this plan on what you're going to do, it sets you up or the client up to be prepared. So when they meet them problems, they're not sitting there going, oh, this dog. They're sitting there going, yes, I planned for this, you know, I made this plan, let's do it, let's give this a go, you know, and it just changes that whole relationship. I think it's just like a really magical moment for the people and their dogs. So I've given a bit of an example here of the sort of the lead and what I do, but she didn't really give me the moments of pulling that I was looking for. So I took her out to a spot that we don't normally sort of walk around in the garden. I was hoping that she would be a bit more interested in sort of trying to yank me around, but she barely did it. But I can give a little bit of an example about changing how I change things. So to begin with, I'm just kind of trying to get her to pull almost. So she wasn't really doing it that well. I wasn't reacting. There was no plan. There's no management plan. I've not written anything down. And this is most clients, you know, normally it's a bit more of a pull there. I've held both hands on, you know, they hold on for dear life. And dogs kind of yanking and pulling them around and they just don't know what to do. So you don't really make any progress. Some owners don't even stop, you know, some owners just allow the dogs to kind of pull them to where they're going, which of course reinforces the pulling behavior. And now I start to use sort of my pace attitude, you know, get down to the dog's level, start to be excitement, start beckoning the dog over to me, but allowing the dog to sniff and explore as well. Like sometimes she ignores me, she's not interested. She's like, nah, I want to smell this right now. So I'm just going to sit down and just wait. Go on then, smell, no worries. You know, as long as you're not ripping my arm off, you're not causing me pain, it's not a potential dangerous situation, you crack on and smell what you've got to smell. It's your walk, you know. And then, yeah, but that bending down and kind of moving myself into her visual area there, so she can see me and see that I'm being an exciting moment, most of the time will bring it to me. I hear there was like a little hole, something had been digging there. So she was very interested in that. But then, you know, I got back and she was back on again. It was very difficult to kind of try and get this video to demonstrate. It's not the best example, but I'm sure you guys can kind of see the point that I'm trying to make. Just allow us to be a dog, you know. And I could take it one step further. I could start seeing what she's smelling. Like, what are you smelling there? And I could start looking as well. Like, that's really interesting, you know. That's another good sort of intersubjective moment for you and your dog to have. You know, like, oh wow, you found this. That's interesting. C is for curiosity. And when we're sort of talking about kids in the childcare, it's a lot deeper than what I put here. Obviously, because children have the ability to talk to you. So you're using curiosity as a way of learning about the child directly. Whereas with dogs, it's more about sort of exploring the world together, you know, being curious as to why a dog may behave the way it does. You know, if we can keep an attitude of curiosity, we or clients are less likely to become frustrated and upset. We start to focus on the factors that are maintaining the behavior rather than the behavior itself. And that's one of the biggest things in childcare and in working with dogs as well. It's so easy to focus on the behavior, like my dog does this, you know, my dog does this, and it's so annoying, you know. Why does your dog do that? That's the question, you know. Your dog's doing something because they've been reinforced to, and there's something driving that behavior. There's something that they're getting from that. How can we provide that? Where does it come from? And once we have that information, we can build a training plan. It's also about what does the dog enjoy? You know, what foods and toys are the favorite? You know, the amount of clients that I work with, and I've said, oh, you know, is your dog food orientated? So many correlations between children and dogs. Yes, Joe. And I'll tell you what, the people that I've spoken to in the dog world, there's a lot of them with a background in childcare, which I just thought was crazy. So many, you know, a lot of them working with challenging behaviors in children's homes, and then they've moved on to challenging behaviors in dogs, or the other way around. And that's something that I noticed. And that's kind of why it's this idea of P.A.C.E, something that I always really enjoyed. I thought it'd be really cool if I can find a way to use this with dogs as well. But obviously not everything translates, but some things do. But yeah, so sometimes clients, they have no idea, you know, does it like squeaky toys, round toys, bear toys? What's the favorite fuss spots? Does there anyone that doesn't like to be touched? Is there any, you know, if it had ham or chicken, which one would the dog choose? And they have no idea. And I say, well, you know, find out. I want a list of 5 favorite toys, 5 favorite foods, places to be touched, you know. And it's not just about building this sort of reinforcement list. It's also about the process of exploring that with the dog. It's also about sitting down with the dog and saying, this toy or this toy, and playing with them and getting to know your dog a little bit. And that also drives those intersubjective moments with your dogs. It also drives getting to know your dog, and also starts to build those relationships. Exploration, so curiosity can also be about how we interact and create intersubjective moments. So this is a little bit about the video we saw earlier on playfulness as well. We're exploring the world together. And a lot of you would have seen the rucksack walk by Steve Mann. If you have, put a little shout out in the thing. One of the best videos I've ever seen. If you haven't seen it, just Google rucksack walk by Steve Mann. I think it's maybe £5 and it goes to charity, the money. But it's really good because he takes the dog out just for a walk with a similar kind of no expectations. He's not giving commands. If the dog pulls in the lead, he just stops. And then he finds a place, and then in this bag, he's put some items, you know, a little bit like the cupboard game. He's very sort of exaggerated with the interest, you know, like, oh my God, what's this? And it's all about interaction with the dog, getting the dog to sort of play with these random items with you. If you haven't seen it, watch it, 100%. Yeah. Expectation. So yeah, so this is the big aspect that I kind of changed, because it was just empathy, but I think empathy kind of comes under acceptance, managing your own behaviors. When you start to do that, you start to feel empathy anyway. When you start to explore your the dog's background and their past and why they behave the way they do, it comes naturally. And we as dog lovers, I think we're all naturally empathetic. An expectation for me is just a more powerful message. You know, I put training with expectation versus exploration and management. So I'm not saying that there isn't a place for training, because it absolutely is, and I love to train with my dog, and we're always training. But if your sole purpose is new dog and you're building relationship, especially if you don't know the dog's training history, even training with a clicker or training with reinforcement and foods might bring back some memories of bad potential things that were happened, you know. Especially sort of trainers that have this idea of this is the behavior I'm going for, you know, and they get so stuck on that behavior that they find themselves getting frustrated when we're doing positive reinforcement and training, you know, and the training experience actually starts to become a negative experience for the dog. And that's why I much rather have zero expectations when we're doing these kind of things, you know. So when I was out there doing the tires and the search and things, there was no expectation for behavior other than I'm going to be with you. That was my only expectation, you know. I had the lead and I was close to her and I'm showing things, you know. And I wasn't forcing her to come back to me if she wandered off, but I was using my voice and trying to be fun to sort of naturally get her to come back to me. So, you know, there is an expectation, but it's only that we explore the world together, you know. That's it. So when you want to focus on building a positive relationship with a dog, especially a dog who may have had a difficult background, it may be better to ignore training plans. Yeah, and this is, I think, as trainers we understand this quite well anyway, but definitely for clients, sometimes if they've got a rescue dog or they've got a dog with a bad background, or even just their own dog, my first advice is, well, let's do some enrichment, let's do some positive sort of interaction building exercises, and let's forget about training plans for now. You know, I know you want this perfect behavior of this sit and stay and wait and stuff like that, but let's get the dog engaged with you and interested in you and wanting to spend time with you first. Training plans have expectation. It can be easy for people to get stuck on trying to build a behavior rather than trying to build rapport and interaction. So I think it's a really important message to send. If you have all this in place already, then walking into a training session with the mindset of P.A.C.E still can help you keep the training fun, interactive, and centered around building a bond between you and your dog while achieving your behavioral goal. So start off with relationship. Some aspects of training are going to happen naturally anyway, and then we start looking at, okay, we're going to do the training side of it now. We're going to make sure that we do the training side in a way that the dog isn't ever going to feel like, oh, I've done training before and I got frustrated and I got confused and then my owner got upset and got angry. You know, it's about making sure we have this history of positive interactions before we just go blindly into trying to train a dog that we don't really know the background for, or that we do know has come from a difficult place. And I finally have my picture for effect. So that's good. I thought, you know, the first time I talked through this myself, it took me like 20 minutes and I was like, that's not enough time. But I've done quite well, 43 minutes. So this is my Gino as a puppy, super cute little puppy wuppy. And she was a dog that got me interested in dog training, because I was given a puppy randomly on my birthday. And then I was like, oh, better learn how to train her. And within, I would say, 5 minutes of trying to train her, something clicked. And I realized that this is all I want to do. I don't want to do anything else in my life. I was like, how can I do this every day forever and get paid? That'd be amazing. And then, I started my dog training journey. So I thought I'd put this cute little picture of her because she was so photogenic as a puppy. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, sort of to round off and end with, now's a good time. Fabulous. It was a great talk. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Molly. Appreciate it. So it's my first kind of talk at something like this, and the idea of P.A.C.E, I'm still kind of structuring it and trying to build all the ideas, so it's kind of thrown together a little bit. But yeah, so a lot of you guys do this sort of stuff anyway. This is Juno, yep, she's lovely. Like a lot of you guys, you're already doing this anyway, you know. But if you come across those clients, and you will come across them, and you can just see that emotionally they are struggling, you know. And they're not quite there on your way of thinking yet. Putting together a structure like P.A.C.E is a really good tool for them to start to build the framework in their mind. Be like, oh, okay, yeah, pace, you know, people thrive off these kind of structures and things like that. Some of us, it's natural, and other people, they just absolutely thrive off it. But yeah, cool. Thank you very much. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I will say goodbye. Just a quick, great shout out to Ruby for organising this wonderful event. It should be how people start the journey with every dog, puppy, or rescue. Yes, Joe, exactly. Exactly. And and the thing is, you'll very quickly learn as well, like whether this dog does have a fearful, you know, they are fearful of people or not, you know, because you'll start to try and interact with them. And if dog is fearful of people, you're very quickly going to start to learn, you know. But yeah, 100%. Everyone should be walking into the first interactions with the dog with this mindset, you know, get rid of those expectations. Expectations mean you want something from the dog, you know. So focused on this behavior, you know. And I've been there, you know, when I first started training Juno, there were certain things that I really wanted her to do. Especially when I started learning to be a trainer as well, and I wanted to be a dog trainer. I gave myself this unrealistic expectation of having the perfect dog. I'm a dog trainer, so I must have a dog that is perfect. I don't know if any of you other guys have ever been through this, where you're like, she's not an advert for my business, I promise, you know. And it got into this weird space where I put this weird expectation on myself and her that she has to be perfect. And it just made training almost impossible for me. It was only when I gave up all those expectations and said, you know what, she's not a trainer dog, she's a dog, she's part of my family. That's why I got her, and that's who I wanted to be. And I gave up all those expectations. And yeah, ever since then, now training's fun, it's easy, you know, because I'm just like, you'll learn it or you don't, you know. But yeah, she's smarter than I ever thought she was, and she does learn things really quick. She's a husky, she's a pain. She's recently learned how to open the door, which is very fun. In the cold, it's not, because I'll be asleep and she'll go and unlock the door and open it. I'm like, why is it cold? And she just lets herself into the garden. That's a real pain. But yeah. Okay, anyway, if there's any more questions, now's the time. If not, big thank you to the organisers. Big thank you to all the other speakers. There's been some wonderful speakers. Really learning a lot myself, because I am still a student. I'm like 2 years in my degree now. And it's just really good to have a place with like-minded people to talk to. So other than that, I'm going to say thank you and goodbye, everybody. If I can work out how to turn this thing off. Maybe I just click this end button here. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, right. Goodbye. Thank you again.